Welcome to AUC Author Series. In this series of programs, we interview the authors in the Atlanta University Center community and introduce you to their latest published works. This program is produced by Brad Ost and Daniel Lee.
Chartier is the assistant head of the Archives Research Center at the Atlanta University Center Robert W. Woodruff Library. She received a BA in American Studies from the University of Texas at Austin, an MA in Southern Studies from Ole Miss, and an MS in Information Studies from the University of Texas. He was a project archivist for the Morehouse College Martin Luther King Jr. Collection and the Voter Education Project Organizational Records. She is a certified archivist, currently serves as co-chair of SAA's Archives and Archivists of Color Roundtable, and is outreach chair for the Society of Georgia Archivists.
Greetings, my name is Andrea Jackson, and I'm the head of the Archives Research Center here at the Atlanta University Center Robert W. Woodruff Library. And today I'm speaking with Courtney Chartier, who is the assistant head of Archives Research Center, a woman that I work closely with every day, and so it's good to talk to you today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So tell us a little bit about one of your projects that you just did. You wrote an article for the New Georgia Encyclopedia about the Voter Education Project Organizational Records. Tell us a little bit about that.
The New Georgia Encyclopedia it's an completely online publication. It's funded by the Georgia Council of the Humanities. Okay. And it is an educational tool, a state-funded educational tool, and it is considered to be a curriculum piece. So public school teachers throughout Georgia and private school teachers, it's not just public. The New Georgia Encyclopedia is meant to be a standard of history about the state of Georgia that can be used in public school curriculum. Every article is vetted, they have great editors, it's a wonderful, wonderful piece, and many states have their own state encyclopedias. So what I wrote about was the Voter Education Project. VEP was an Atlanta-based civil rights organization. It was founded in the 1960s, but was active up until the 1990s here in Atlanta. And the Woodruff Library has the organizational records for VEP. There's hundreds and hundreds of feet of records upstairs in the Archives Research Center that detail the work done by VEP in the South. What they did was they were really one of those agencies you just don't hear about in the civil rights movement. They were the money. Right. They were a private organization that funded voter registration and voter education projects across the South. And that's all the way across the South, including Texas. So they initially funded a lot of African American organizations, but then later on, especially in the 1970s, were funding a lot of Latino rights organizations that ran voter campaigns, women's rights organizations. Some of these were, specific to states or specific to small counties or towns, but some of them were also Southwide. So they did a lot of important work. They were actually, VEP was actually the brainchild, I guess you would say, of Robert F. Kennedy. He really wanted a way for the federal government to be able to give funds to the civil rights movement, but couldn't really come right out politically and publicly and say, we want to give money to Martin Luther King. Okay. So the idea was you would create this organization that would be completely funded by grants, and then in turn that organization would give grants to organizations like Dr. King's Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and they would be able to run voter campaigns. SCLC was one of the first applicants. The very first applicant was actually the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in Selma, and that their work there, registering people to vote and basically kicking up a lot of dust, led directly to the Selma to Montgomery March. And so this organization is very, very deep in the kind of the classic civil rights movement in the South in the 60s. They're very, very important, but a lot of people don't know who they are.
Okay. So tell us about how you came to know who they were, about the records. What was your role with Voter Education Project Organizational Records?
I was the archivist. The Woodruff Library received a grant from an organization called the Council on Library and Information Resources. And they had a big project called Cataloging Hidden Collections. It's still an ongoing project. And they just give grant funds to institutions that have collections that are they call it hidden. And it means stuff that's not only hidden because it maybe, your institution never had money to take care of it or to put it out front, but it also means hidden in that there are communities that are more hidden in American history, including, the African American South is a great example. And so, and the South in general, really. But, so we received a large grant. I was hired as project archivist, and myself and a team of one other archivist, as well as a whole slew of students from AUC, worked on what we call processing the collection, which is we opened every single box of records, we looked at everything, decided, what it all was, organized it so it all makes sense. So now all the financial records are with the financial records, and the files about the different projects are all together, and that kind of thing. So we organized it, we wrote a guide to it, we put everything in brand new shiny boxes and folders so it looks really neat and tidy. And now the guide to that is available online on the Woodruff Library website. And so people can come in and do research and learn about VEP and learn about the work that they did.
Wonderful. Talk to us about how you even became interested in writing about the voter education project.
Well, one of my jobs here is, like I said, the processing angle. But another one of our jobs in the Archives Research Center is to promote the use of our collections. And so, I consider it part of my job to write about our collections. In the past, I've written a lot about the Morehouse College Martin Luther King collection, which I also worked on as a project archivist. And I'm currently writing on one of our other collections, the Tupac Amaru Shakur papers. And I'll publish on that soon. But with VEP, I had another reason to want to publish on it, which is that it's so unknown. So few people are aware of it. When I first got the job, I just went on the Google and typed in voter education project, and what came back were articles that had the word voter, the word education, and the word project in them. Couldn't find anything that was about the voter education project that was based in Atlanta. Or I would find it mentioned in pieces about the Southern Regional Council, which was its original parent organization, but nothing written about it. VEP still has no specific articles written about it or in no books. The only comprehensive piece ever written about it is the one I put in the new George Encyclopedia. Wow. And it's a shame. Right. And I'm really hoping that because they are a civil rights organization that lasted well beyond 1968, right, which is when a lot of people kind of cut off mentally with civil rights, right, that they will be a part of new scholarship, right, of the movement, which is really extending into the 70s and into the concept of the beloved community and human rights as opposed to just civil rights for African Americans, that the movement really extended into other areas, into other decades. And I'm hoping that exposing more of VEP will lead people to write about that time period.
Absolutely, I'm sure that it will. So, can you talk a little bit about the connection between, you mentioned Southern Regional Council, and you've worked on the Morehouse College Martin Luther King Jr. collection. Talk about how the Voter Education Project is important, well, the record specifically, how that is important to this story of civil rights that the Archives Research Center is able to document. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of collections about civil rights and human rights, and including SRC. So, talk about Voter Education Project being a complement to some of those.
Well, it absolutely is, and I think one of the reasons is, I don't know exactly how to say this, but I think when people think about the civil rights movement, of course, we all think about Martin Luther King Jr., and we think about the I Have a Dream speech, and the March on Washington, and the dramatic Selma to Montgomery March. What a lot of people don't think about is the effort and the organization and the money that had to go into that. And it's one of the reasons the Morehouse College King collection is so great is as well as having, Dr. King's handwritten speeches, the things that really inspire us, we also have all the office documents. The amount of planning that went into a single march is vast.
Right.
And so when you look at the Voter Education Project, you can see the amount of planning, the amount of resources it really took to make an education project successful. I mean, because it's not just giving a municipality organization money and saying, here, go do this. There's an incredible amount of training that has to go into it. You have to find people that are willing to buy in, and especially in the 1960s, willing to buy in the face of violence. Or just harassment.
Right.
You have to find people that are willing to come. I mean, you have to print things. You have to, there's so much that goes into that. And VEP can really show
all of that.
How that happens. Now, there's another reason it's an important collection. And one of VEP's other functions was as a research institution.
Right.
They, one of their jobs was to collect voter data from all over the South. And so they would follow local elections, they would follow state elections, and they even followed national elections. They usually took statistics on presidential elections. Well, one thing that VEP did that not all other people did, and which I'm not sure is legal for certain institutions, is they would collect racial data on voters. And that's not something that's generally acceptable, although sometimes you do see voting statistics reported along gender lines, like women tend to vote for this, women tend to vote for that. But VEP was really interested in, if we've registered 150 black people in this county, who did they vote for? What direction is this going in? Or if they, or if there was a county that had its first ever African American running for office, they were interested in those results. Who did the black citizens vote for? Who did the white citizens vote for? Where were these people's support coming from? And so they have there's a ton of election data from all over the South that's broken down frequently along racial lines in the collection. And that's a really important sort of political science piece that's also a portion of the civil rights movement.
So there are statistics and reports in the collection.
Yes, and that's a great thing. Is there are statistics, so you have this kind of very, very quantitative data, but then you have reports from people that receive grants about what they face trying to do a voter campaign. So you have this qualitative data that's really telling a story of people, where you still have the numbers to back it up. It's a great collection.
Good. So to kind of make it more personal, who are some of the names that we know from
There are definitely some big names associated with VEP. The biggest is John Lewis, who is my congressman here in Fulton County. He was an executive director of VEP, one of the first, and a really inspiring figure in my opinion. We have a lot of his speeches from the 1970s, and he really saw VEP as an important instrument for carrying on Dr. King's work and for funding what Dr. King called the beloved community. And John Lewis is the reason VEP started to fund those Latino projects and Native American projects and focusing on bringing women into the voter registration campaigns. And because he really, really believed in Dr. King's message of kind of moving beyond, once the Voting Rights Act had been passed, moving beyond just focusing on African Americans. So on a local level, well, also national, Julian Bond was associated with the organization, Vernon Jordan, and also Maynard Jackson. Although he's passed, he was very involved in VEP. He gave a lot of speeches for them, rode around in Georgia in a car and went to different little tiny towns, encourage people to get out and vote, encourage people to go to the voter education classes. And we also, the Archives Research Center also has Maynard Jackson's papers. So it's kind of another way we dovetail across these lines in the archives is we have Maynard Jackson's work there, but we also have the work he did for VEP.
Absolutely.